Well, it must be a Monday around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And I guess I must be Charles Morse. That's what my mama named me. Named after my uncle. And the funny thing is, I saw my uncle last summer. He lives over in St. Pete. I hadn't seen him for a while. And I asked him, I said, Uncle Charles, could you tell me the story of how I was named after you? He said, I don't know. He said, I did name your sister, but I have no idea how you were named after me. So I thought it was interesting. But anyway, I'm Charles Morse, named after my uncle. And we don't know why. But this is the Journey 2020, and this is where we come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. Been around since 2013. I guess I should put my name up. That's what it's called. Production correct. Okay. And it actually should have come up about like 5 seconds after I started saying, hello, hi, I'm Charles Morris. But anyway, been doing this for I don't know how many years, and sometimes even when you think that you remember, you don't. And I guess that's part of just doing it for too long. But anyway, we come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. We've been doing so since 2013. And first of all, I want to say, for those who may have relatives up in the Kentucky area, in the many states that the tornado hit, I want to say many prayers go out for family and friends. And for those, and I hope that you and all of us are praying for those that are dealing with today's issues and circumstances of each day, because around the world there's always something happening, and that's why we must continuously stay in prayer. So my prayers are going out for those that are dealing with so much, no matter where you are. And I like to say that and stay in prayer because we certainly need it so very important. But this is the Journey 2020, and for questions, comments, and concerns, I always like to say, you can always hit me up with an email at any time. I also do a show called a Pastor's Roundtable, and we also have a prayer list and so on and so forth. So be on the lookout for that. As a matter of fact, the Pastor's Roundtable topic this month is how have we truly taken Christ out of Christmas? Wow. So I think that's a very good topic. Also, I've never said this on the show, but I guess I should now. Because it's so important to me. If you would like to be on our prayer list, you can email us as well from the Pastors Roundtable. I have several pastors on churches, but if you like to be on our prayer list and to find out more about the Pastors Roundtable as well as the Journey 2020, email me, and we will respond. This is why I think that's so very important. So the topic for today, kind of a different show today. I'm talking to a friend that I've been knowing for a very long time, and she's been on the show. And what's so great about her is that she has a great ministry, okay? When I say a great ministry, it's, if you know my personality, if you know me, I talk to a lot of women and have been doing so for many years. And the Pastor Roundtable, I mean, they pick on me all the time because they say I just love punishment, because I try to have conversation with women and they look at me and they just go like, you just want to get knocked upside your head. and they tease me all the time about it, which I guess I won't say what they're really saying, but I know what they're saying to me. So because we're so different, but anyway, that's another show. So it's so nice when you do speak to a woman that has a tad bit better understanding than a lot of women. It's kind of rare. It happens once in a while where you can have certain conversations and they're looking outside of themselves versus their feelings and their emotions for the most part. So it's always nice when you can have those kind of conversations. So what today's show is about? Well, I'm going to have her give a little history on herself so you can better understand, which I think is so important, because she's going to talk about, because she's a writer. She's been writing for a long period of time. We're going to talk about that. But the mystery writer. How many of you have a book in you and want to be a mystery writer in addition to all the other things that you can write about? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to eventually get to her and her mystery writing, but she is so full of so much, I guess, wisdom and purpose that we're going to talk with her, and she's going to tell her story about how she had to overcome an aneurysm, how she had to learn things over again, so on and so forth. So please stay tuned because she has a great story to tell, and we're going to talk about the mystery writing as well. But this is my friend that I've been knowing for a while, and I call her Miss Cat. Meow. And I want to say, how you doing, Miss Cat? How you doing, Miss Cat?
Good, very good.
Well, you know,
You?
I love to see the smile, and you're still looking good. You know, I was just telling you, in my age bracket, it's not too often that you see somebody that you've been knowing for a while, and you be like, oh, well, okay, if I didn't know you, I would still ask you for your number.
What are you talking about? I'm in my early 30s.
Yeah, well, yeah, well, see, the thing of it is, she can get away with that, but I know better. I know better, but that's good. So I had you on the show before, and you are a writer, you are an educator, and
Hmm.
there's so many facets to your life. You're an author, but once you give us a little history on Miss Hayes, we need to know a little history, and because there's so many. I mean, I asked you a word where we talked about coming on the show, but there's another side to it that I can spend the next hour on your recovery and what you had to come back from. That's a show by itself. But quickly
Yeah.
give us a little, because when I met you, you was in Arizona. I don't know if you
Right.
remember that, but you was in Arizona. You was out there way south, near west somewhere, and come to find out that you had family in Jacksonville. Yeah.
Hmm.
So give us a
Yeah.
little history on.
Yeah. I originally ended up in, excuse me, in Arizona because I went to pursue my doctorate in educational leadership and supervision.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, I had been in New York and I was a teacher. And prior to that, I was born in England and migrated to the States with my parents when I was young. But in Arizona was when I first assumed uh, a principalship. And I actually spent more time as a principal than a teacher. And you alluded to an illness. And yes, 14 years ago, almost to the date, I had a brain hemorrhage when I had my last baby, which is not uncommon. It's one of the things that can kill women in childbirth. And thankfully, I recovered. And that experience led me to my greatest passion, and that was writing.
But you were writing before then, though. You were writing before then because
Yes, I,
you be-
yeah,
because I remember, and I actually have some of your writings, a great deal of your writings that you shared
yeah,
with me.
that's
So you
right.
were
I
writing.
was,
You was writing. You've been writing for a very long time. So tell us, where did that passion come from? The writing.
so writing was a first love. And without making a huge long story out of it, I first did attempt to pursue journalism, and it was so competitive in New York. It was like being an actress. So I ended up becoming an educator and loved it. I never looked back. But my love for writing started with my parents. They were avid readers, especially my father. He loved to write, he was a poet. And because we didn't have television, our biggest entertainment was reading, writing plays, entertaining ourselves. And our father usually had a weekly story time. Even when we were older, he would go into the greats and read Shakespeare and James Baldwin and um, T.S. Eliot. So I grew up with someone who had a great respect for literature, and it was always there. So even as a principal, I wrote a column for several different publications, and one I even became an assistant editor for.
With you doing, with you being an educator, and I spoke briefly about this in doing the introduction, and I just want to ask you because I just finished up a series on ADHD, and I just said the moment that you speak to an educator about some of the learning difficulties when you're dealing with kids, what did you feel or what did you see as a challenge? Because I'm curious now, because watching the series and me growing up and not realizing a lot of the things that I was dealing with and not being able to be diagnosed until well after I had graduated from college, knowing that there was something a little different in the challenges that I had and how it formed and shaped me in a way in which I just always sat in the back of the classroom, never wanted the teacher to call on me. Just little things that I felt odd about. And it wasn't until I went and was tested, and then the person who said these things said, you probably do this like this, and you probably do this like that. And I'm sitting there looking at her like, how do you know this? And she just sitting there just going through stuff, and she's saying, you probably do this like this. And I'm standing there like in awe of her knowing these things, because you feel like an alien. And so, and then when she said, she did it just like this. She said, there's a lot of people like you. And I'm like, art? Like, really? So I'm blown away at the whole thing of her saying what she's saying, because now it's the first time that I'm talking to somebody that has an understanding of something that I don't understand whatsoever. But now she's relaying back to me things in which I've always tried to hide. And so I'm going to go off subject for a minute for the sake of understanding how important it is people understand these things, because finishing up this series on ADHD, did you run across that as an educator, and how did you feel this? Now I'm asking for something personal now, and I'm asking you, how did you think the school system dealt with kids who may have had ADHD or learning disabilities?
Well, that's a complicated question
Mm-hmm.
because we get into the issue of race and culture and equality. And I definitely saw a difference in the way that children of color were handled versus children who were white. And so the issue is many children who had ADHD or ADD and were brown were looked at as behavioral problems and challenges. And their counterparts received different attention and the services that they needed. So a lot of times, instead of treating the challenge that the brown child had, they were treated as a problem, an issue. And so not only were they demonized as having behavior problems, but then their educational needs were not being met. So I learned as an educator to just assume that everyone was ADD and ADHD, especially my boys. And I had that experience because I had two brothers who had ADD and ADHD. And I made my classrooms very sensory, lots of action, lots of ability to get up and move around, lots of freedom. And children very early on were able to make decisions for themselves, be autonomous, teach them independence, teach them self confidence. And I learned quickly by having a diverse classroom in teaching to all five senses that I was able to reach more children. And I struggle so much less with behavioral issues because the students were having so much fun and they were so engaged in a community that their needs were being met.
Well, you're a perfect example of what I meant by when you call to do what you do. You just expressed that, but also a lot of what you said came out of the three-part series. A lot of what you said was talked about and how people of color are treated and diagnosed totally different, totally different. And I mean, there was just so much information for the parents and for even educators for them to better understand how this issue can be resolved in a way that, because now they have all these bullet points and things to look out for, and that have a better understanding of the behavior itself. So I'm happy that you were able to share that with us because, like I said, we're just finishing it up, and I wish that I had gotten a hold of you earlier because I know that Dr. Robinson, who actually put this on, would have loved to talk to you, because every time I talk to somebody like you, an educator, they share similar experiences of what you talked about, which brings us up to, now we're going to get away from that part, but I did want to let people know and feel your spirit as an educator. So with that being said, you you're you're called. It's in your spirit. So thank you for the the many lives that you have touched. Because I always say this, and I've been saying this for years. For some odd reason, in our culture, in our country, educators are not respected in the terms of the role that they play. They're downplayed, and what you do is probably one of the most important profession, one of the most important jobs in all of the world, because you form and shape our culture and our society, and it's up to you to teach our kids. And what is a job that is more important than that? But somehow or another, an athlete or a singer or an actress get more high fives than educators, and I don't understand that, whatsoever. But anyway, that's my own
Right.
little personal thing. But with your writing, but also your writing, and I'm gonna say it like this, brought you into your ministry. So won't you talk about that? Won't you talk about your ministry and what you do, especially when it comes to women?
Yeah, so when I got sick, I started writing down my mini sermons to my daughters. They would tease me and they would be like, "Oh my God, this is sermon 1000." And basically, they were life lessons in the questions that they would ask me about all kinds of things and challenges with being a woman and growing into adulthood. And so I ended up with this book, which is called God's Little Black Dress for Women: How to Put on the Full Armor of God Without Losing Your Femininity. But even prior to that, once I left education and I thought it was going to be temporary, I wrote what I knew, and I knew curriculum. So I worked for churches, charter schools, and independent programs that needed someone who knew how to build curriculum. And through that, I began to also speak. I came alongside the pastor's wife in one of the churches that I was there for quite a bit, and ended up writing the entire curriculum for that program. It became our largest daytime programming for women. I also built the children's program. I wrote all of the curriculum for that and realized that I had a calling and an anointing to speak to women. And the teacher in me kept coming out and wanting to engage more and more with women. And I knew I was onto something because people enjoyed connecting with me in that way. And I give glory to God for that.
Wow. I know when you came on the show before, that was one of the main reasons why you came on the last time you were on. But then you're working on something new, something different, or was that already in the plans and that was something that you didn't share with me at that time? So, what is it that you're working on now?
So I have finished a manuscript for a book called A Fifth of the Story, unless a publisher wants me to change the title. And I am also working on the sequel. And it is a general market thriller. Shoot 'em up, bang, bang. Something I never thought I would be capable of writing.
Really?
Yeah, it's action thriller, mystery, suspense, and I enjoy reading and watching movies in that particular genre, and never thought I was called to write in that genre. And so it happened by mistake. I had been fooling around with this one particular project, and I brought it to a writing conference and met with an editor who told me, if you listen to what I say, you will be published. This, your writing is very good. You just need to hone in on certain things, continue to work with the critique group, and continue to flesh out this story, which I did. And it's now currently in the hands of an agency.
But my question that I'm asking, you know what's funny though, and I will say this, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, and that is this right here. When we get to do little things like that, does that means that we get to, and I hope you don't take it, do we get to see the mystery of like maybe the bad girl? If you know what I mean. I mean, it's just writing, but do we really get to see the behind scenes of maybe the bad girl that just never comes out?
Oh yeah, you people who've read my stuff, they're like, "Oh, you have a sick mind. I didn't know that about you." But I seem like a girly girl, and I am. But I'm a Taekwondo black belt, and my biggest strength in Taekwondo was sparring. I'm a good fighter. So even
Oh,
the scenes in the book that have to do with fighting, they're authentic, and they're coming from a place where I know what I'm talking about. And so you do get to see the twisted mind of Catherine.
well, see, it's good that you can at least talk about it because some people don't know how to put it in a proper perspective because they think they're going to be perceived differently or perceived wrong. But you know, when you understand it, you can explain it and then you can laugh about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because you're not taking yourself too seriously. And so we all have it. It's just acknowledging it and being able to put it in the context in which you can say, you know what, yeah, like what you just said. So what is that like for you to be able to do that?
There is a tremendous amount of freedom doing that. And so I also can get into the mind of someone who is dark, like let's say my antagonist. And in the fifth of the story, there is a very devious person. He does unthinkable things. He's so disloyal. And it lets me get into their mind and think, how did they get there? So I go really deep with my characters. I write pages of backstory that I never put into the book. I know what they like to eat, where they like to go. I know all about their childhood, their darkest secrets, their greatest dreams. And so it helps me to build a very three-dimensional character. So my antagonist is just not a sick person that kills all kinds of people, including older women and children. It's a horrible person. But there's something lovable about him because he's so three-dimensional. He's great with animals. He's intuitive. There are things that we could really like about him. And it just shows
Hold
me
on, wait a minute,
that
wait a minute, wait a
he,
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. Hold on, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just got to laugh for a minute. Okay, go ahead and finish.
but it just helps me to get into the minds of different people. And I think I grow as a person because I may be one party politically, but then I'll write from the perspective who's someone in a different political party or someone who's a different race than me, and they experience life differently and see things from a different lens. So it helps to broaden my horizon and my perspective and understanding of my brother across the table, across the street.
Now, have you written something like this even before? Or when did that come to mind to say, you know what, let me venture down or go into this room? When did that happen? When did that happen?
Well, I've always loved short stories. I love to read them and I love to write them. And I had begun entering short stories into contests and I began winning. And I knew that there was something to the stories that I was writing and to the broader message that I wanted to tell or share.
Okay, I'm going to ask you this right here. If you can you share with us something nice, short, and sweet about the sickness of this character?
Okay. The sickness of this character.
Yeah,
So what's interesting
his mental challenges, what he may have.
is
Share something that you go like, well, this character like to eat rats. I don't know what.
okay. So this character has PTSD, both from his career overseas and being chased by terrorists, but he also has PTSD because of a very abusive father. And because of that, he fights all the time with deep-seated racism. And so even the people that he's supposed to be protecting, he actually is working to kill them. So he's someone who is a high-ranking person in the intelligence field, and he's supposed to be protecting and serving all United citizens, and he's not.
Wow. Okay. So with that being said, let me see how I can ask this question. I'm trying to phrase it correctly. Well, let me ask you, how do you think your characters relate to real life? And because all of us have a past, and because of our past, it molds and shapes us. As I have had some years on this earth, when you sit back and when you listen to your friends, and then you're able to communicate, and it's a wonderful thing when you have the type of relationship where some people that you know, because as you grow older, you realize people who are your friends and how small your circle is, and that's true, because people who are truly your friends. And then when you're able to have conversation and communicate, and then you hear truly about things among your family and friends that you never knew, because now they're able to share and they better understand what molded and shaped them and the challenges that they still facing this day because of their childhood, of something that may have happened or something that may not have happened. What I mean by that, something that did not happen was they were not nurtured in this area of their lives, or what was
Right.
so important to be nurtured. And it's little things like that. And so how do you think your characters come into play into real life, and how do you see that?
They come into play in real life because they're dealing with modern day issues happening in real time, but they also examine themes of hope, loss, redemption, and loyalty. And something that you talked about was, as you get older, your circle shrinks. Maybe not to the outside. Maybe people think you have a ton of friends, but as you get seasoned, you realize through the test of time and challenges that the people who you can really trust are not as many as you once thought.
That's very true, and that comes with time, and with that comes wisdom, and then you start to understand some things that you thought were that are not, and what's real and what you thought was real. But that comes with spending time on this earth. And I'm curious because, and I don't look at things the way people may, they may read something of one of your characters and look at you like, I don't know if I don't, but I think all of us have that, you know, because in a way, there's a lot of times, because I come from the field of film and television, and when I look at movies or the production of any show, I look at it from the production part of it. Of when I see a play, or when I see a TV show, or when I see a movie, I'm always looking at it from the producer side and the production part of it. And I'm looking at the directing and the writing and the lighting and the creativity of it. So because, like for an example, I was just talking about Angela Adams earlier, who does the Black Men's Health Summit, and she was doing this research study on prostate cancer, and she had men come in to answer some questions, and she's doing a great job with this. And it was funny because one of the men said something, and so based on me talking to him later, he was this guy that was a martial artist, and under the guy that he learned, and the tree where he fall under is a guy who was really, really, really good. So I know his martial arts is real. But he said something that, and when I looked at him, and I was like, and what he said was, and he wasn't a young guy, but he wasn't an old guy, but he was somewhere probably in his 50s or so, and he said something that he doesn't watch martial arts movies because he took martial arts and his instructor, and because he saw his instructor the way that he did, and he saw martial arts movies the way that he did. And so I don't watch martial arts movie because the guys in the martial arts movie can't do what my instructor do. And I didn't say this to him, but this is what I want to say to him. I said, a martial arts movie, this is what I said to myself, has absolutely nothing to do with martial arts. Nothing. All it
Mm-hmm.
is a form of somebody trying to make some money. So you thinking in
Mm-hmm.
the terms that this martial arts movie has something to do with martial arts. No, it's there to make them money. They don't care about no martial arts, but that's his in depth of understanding. Like, no, this thing is specifically there to make money. It has nothing to do with martial arts. Martial arts is just a tool to make them money. So if
Right.
you're looking at that thinking, well, no, that concept came from I want to make some money. So with
Yeah.
with the mindset and so when I say this, because there's times I've come up with some ideas that I want to do as far as a movie, and then I sit there and I say to myself, boy, if I could produce this movie right here, some people would think, I don't know if they would even put this on the screen. Because
Yeah.
you think of some stuff and you'd be like, it's
Yeah.
so sinister and so, because some of this stuff you'd be like, you know what, I could have came up with a better idea than that movie right there. And it'd be like, I think
Mm-hmm.
everybody would have died. But see, but but the point of it is, like, I'm not into the gory movies. That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. But there's some stuff that you do that you can do in your creative mind about the idea and the concept of a movie sometimes, and you be like, I could have done a better job than that right there,
Right.
because the whole idea and what capture us, because your Alfred Hitchcock, and they talk about him and that scene in the shower and one of the famous scenes and and how creative it was, and but for yourself, I just love the idea that you're able to express yourself like that. And so what is it that we're going to see more of in the future when it comes to you and your creative mind and your wanting to create more characters? How many more characters do we have there, Kat?
Yeah. Well, I've already, like I said, I've already begun the sequel to this book. And the first book is told from a male's perspective. And I tell a story from a white male's perspective, which is interesting. And I nail it. And
Hold on. Wait a
the
minute. So hold on. Wait a minute. You got to go back. You got to back up on that one. So you got to talk a little bit more about that. Now, what is that again? Because now you really got me. Talk a little bit more about that.
so the book is told from the perspective of a guy called Brock O'Reilly. I love him. He he's such a great protagonist. Just lots of layers to him. But he too has a dark side, and he fights demons all the time regarding things that he experienced growing up. And he experienced racism from black kids growing up in a predominantly black neighborhood. And I was able to see things from his perspective. Now, writing from the perspective of a white male is not that hard for me. My parents are mixed race, and so I experienced life growing up looking at things from a lot of different perspectives. So I'm just to say that it's not like I have no affiliation with someone who is Caucasian. Um,
I'm gonna take you off the center line for a second. Okay. Now, when I ask you this question, you're gonna understand this, but the people that are not of color probably have no idea what I'm saying. When I look at the color of your skin, and when I look at your gorgeous, beautiful hair, can you share with us your own form of racism among people of color growing up because of your hair and the color of your skin within your own race?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I experienced it on a lot of levels because I came here as an immigrant and I had a strong British accent. And I just felt like I never fit in. My brother and I, especially my brother, who's extremely racially ambiguous. And so we never felt black enough or white enough for anyone. Ironically, we fit in better with people who were mixed race and understood what we went through, people who were foreigners, people who were Hispanic, because we tended to look more like them. And so those were the challenges that I grew up with, being called by blacks white girl, because I never spoke in ebonics or slang or anything to that effect. My parents didn't speak that way, so I didn't understand. I'm like, I'm just speaking as a normal person. And what was sad is for me to speak properly is sounding white. So then to sound ignorant is black.
Yeah, no, it is that has always put me in awe. That it's like, well, I don't even. That's a whole nother show, Kat. That's a whole nother show about the ignorance, and that's
Yeah.
that's and it just ticks me off because for some odd reason we just want to just wallow in the ignorance of it all and be proud of it and take part of it and own it. See, that's the part
Right.
that bothers me is that we want to own the ignorance and the stupidity,
Yeah.
and you want to be associated with it in a way that it belongs to us. It's just like, and you just like, what? And then I think that's one of the challenge, especially it's funny because I'm talking to an educator. It, um, that's one of the things in which every time we're put in a situation where you have a choice of educating yourself or being held to a standard, just a regular standard, it's not okay. But if you want to put the standard to being held to education versus you being an athlete, it's like this standard just goes out the room. It shouldn't even be brought into the room. If I want to hold you to the standard of being an outstanding athlete, I got everybody excited. Oh, yes, I
Mm-hmm.
can. Yes, I will. Yes, I must. But if I want to hold you to the standard of just being able to pull in a high C and maybe a low B, what you, what you talking about, Willis? So
Yeah.
it's just so mind-boggling to the ignorance in that you refuse to look inward to say, because when, in my mentoring and talking with kids, I always tell them, I said, somebody lied to you.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody didn't tell you how great you are.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody didn't tap in you to tell you the greatest gift that God gave you was your mind, and
Right.
that you should be able to use it in a manner to when it says that you can become anything that you want to become. It starts in between your ears, and when it is preached to you how important education is. And it's funny too because one of my friends said something on one of the shows that I do, and I never thought of it that way, but when he said it, it made sense. He said, one thing that this country provides you that is open to every individual, and that is you can go as high as you want when it comes to your education. If you want to go get a bachelor's, you can. If you want to go get an AA degree, you can. If you want to go to a trade school, you can. If you want a master's, you can. If you want a PhD in this country, you can. Now, when you finish, you may owe a whole bunch of money.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to, you can. And that's totally, that is very true. And nobody can stop you from doing that but yourself. And but when he said it, I was like, you know what? That is so true. You can go as high as you want to, and that's something that no one can take away from you. And understanding how this country works, how it works in the mindset. There's a lot of ignorance in this culture and in this society, but you got to figure out how it works, because there's a whole bunch of ignorance into it, and
Right.
arrogance and egotism and stupidity. But it works if you understand the system. But that's just me talking.
Mm-hmm.
So finish with your characters. I'm sorry, I broke you up for a second. So finish with your characters.
Yeah, so the first book, I actually write from the perspective of a white male, but I also tell the story of his relationship with two of his friends. One who is married to a black girl, very educated. Her father is a likely candidate for the presidency, and that's a hot button topic. And she actually picks up the story in the sequel, and we tell her backstory and bring it to the point of where the first novel started. So we tell her story and the challenges that she experiences as a very educated person in a field where there are not many African Americans, especially females, and the
Now,
challenges of being in an interracial relationship and raising boys who are interracial, but the world sees them as just black.
now, I do like what you said about the character who has the potential, probability of becoming president, because it's not like some crazy guy can't become president, right? Right? I mean, it's not like you
Right,
can't have
yeah.
all these issues and just be totally whack and be the A1A narcissist in all of the world and you become president. I mean, that's a
Right,
probability, right?
yeah, yeah. We've shown, our country has shown that anyone can be president.
It was funny up up until George Bush, the the son. That was true, because my aunt used to always say he's a perfect example, but somebody took it to a whole nother level.
Hmm.
Somebody took it to a whole nother level other than you. And as a matter of fact, because the joke for a long time was that you would see George Bush and be like, I don't look so bad as president, do I? You're like, you probably would want to bring me back right about now.
Oh
So,
my goodness.
so, okay, so tell us the name of your book again. Tell us the name of your book.
So the first book is called A Fifth of the Story. And the second book, the working title is Task Force Aries. And because of that, I've even started a podcast, and I've built a platform for a place where writers of my genre can come together, share about their journeys, and give advice to others. And we just have a place where we can work on building our own platforms while also getting educated.
The first book, where can we find it?
Well, we can't find it yet because it's still in the hands of an agent. So, traditional publishing, I have to wait for them
Well,
to then shop a
well, I'm
publisher.
sorry. I asked it the wrong way. How
Yeah.
long before we can? I asked it wrong. How long before we'll be able to purchase the book is what I meant to ask you.
I believe that's going to be an 18 to 24-month process. So I hope to come back and be talking about when it's coming out on your show.
Okay. Well, yeah. So in in the meantime, I got a feeling we're gonna come up with some more characters because I can tell that we're digging deep down into the some more personalities that we probably don't know about right now. This part of
Yeah.
Dr. Hayes, I guess her makeup, right? How many characters you got up in there?
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of characters because there's a lot of people I have to kill off. But main characters is Brock O'Reilly, and then there are his two friends, Shugs and Pang, his wife, whose name is Patricia, then her mother and father, and then there's Dr. Harper, and she is the three guys' boss. She's a tough cookie, but I love her. She's got a lot of layers to her.
Is that like anybody that we know?
In there, a little bit of me in there. Is that what you mean? I would love for my readers to read it and then tell me what they think.
Question, real quick. Have you shared any of this with your daughters?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and the daughter's response.
Well, I'll read them short excerpts, especially when it comes to dialogue. Did you get this? Did you understand what they were saying? Or a scene, an action scene. Could you see this in your mind? How does it play out? And often they're like, oh my goodness, this is like a movie. This is like an action packed movie. And if they say, I'm not really seeing this, or this dialogue doesn't sound believable, I take their advice.
Now this
But I
is
also work closely with an editor and a critique group to address a lot of those different issues.
now this is the ultimate question. What does your husband think of your characters?
Well, he gets to be introduced to them early on. And I really depend heavily on my husband and my editor to make sure that my male characters are believable. I have a strong grasp on the dialogue, the way a man thinks, because I grew up with brothers, had a lot of good friends who are male. But to be in the actual mind of a man is very different. So if they would say, no, men don't think like that, they would never say this, they would never do that. Even in certain gestures, like my husband would say, he's not going to hug him, he's going to punch him on the shoulder. So their feedback is extremely important to make sure that my characters are believable.
You said something that hit me right smack in the face of a lot of times that I wish I had help because over my many years of having female friends, and you talk to them and you talk to them and you talk to them and you talk to them, and I had to learn a lot because I had to learn that I won't get into that part of it, but it's
Mhm.
so hard for me to get them to understand that the processes work differently. For some odd reason, And this is how I phrase it the best of my ability, and some of them don't get it at all, was that you try to give me your stuff and it doesn't fit. What God gave you is different than what he gave me. I can't give you my stuff because it doesn't fit, and vice versa. And for some reason, I got some female friends, and I guess it's been, and it will always be, that they really don't understand that the processes are different to the degree that I don't process stuff. My rhyme and my reason and my motive is just totally different than what you think because the processes work differently. And so my feelings and my emotions does not run the way yours do to motivate me for the reasons that I do what I do or don't do. And for some reason, it just, for some of us, it's just so hard for you not to see and feel what I feel, the way that I feel, and how I think you should feel, and why you do or don't do. That is hard for a lot of people. But it's good that you have the wisdom that God gave you that, because there's some people who don't have a clue. I'm serious, they just
Mm-hmm.
don't. And that's so important because it's it's almost like a lot of times, and I just say it, and I just say it like this. A lot of times we will see a character on TV special, a person of color, and we'll go, that role or that was put in a script by that a person that's white, because a black person would never do that like that. They would never say that.
Right.
No, that just totally off script for people of color. That was written and put in by a white person. How many times you've said that watching something?
Or reading something. Mm-hmm.
I can remember when I worked, because I worked at a few of the television stations, and I worked in news, and I worked in news for a very long time. And I never will forget when the news would come on in the behind the scenes crew, and we would take little bets, and we would turn away from the screen and just listen to the story. And I'm sorry, this is what we used to do. We would turn away and we would listen. And then when we would listen, we'll go, that was written by this person. That was written by that person. That was our way of saying what was written by a white person and what was written by a black person. This is in the newsroom, because even there you could tell the difference in how the story was being told.
Right.
And that's just the truth, and that's one of the biggest challenges that would always be being a member of the National Association of Black Journalists, and their fight with the diversity in the newsroom, because the stories would be told differently than how I would tell the story, or a person of color would cover the story, especially when you in the black neighborhoods. So that was like, whoa. And I've been telling this story for years, and I really won't get into it, but there's a gentleman by the name of Hank Gathers. He was a famous basketball player that died on the court, and he was out of Philadelphia. And my cousin, who worked at one of the top CBS affiliates there, was covering, and Hank Gathers was a big story because he was a big college player who actually died on the court and was probably going to be drafted like really high in the NBA. And he died on the court. And so when he had his funeral, my cousin was telling me the story of how the producer was, they was going to blows. They was going to blows. So the black reporter refused to go into the funeral and cover it the way that the producer wanted him to do that. And because the black reporter was like, I'm going to respect this family, and I'm not going to do what you want me to do because it's disrespectful. So it was
Right.
just, and I will always remember that, because our mindset is, this family upon this day deserved to be able to go about burying their loved one in a way that the seat that I'm sitting in, I'm not going to go and cross those lines. But the producer didn't care, and he refused to do so. So it's just little things like that why diversity is so important. And I
It
shared
is.
something very similar when I was working at a TV station, but the reporter that I was working with, at least she listened and she understood when I said what I said to her, because her brother was just shot and killed, and he was over there laying over there on the ground dead, and she wanted to go and approach his sister in a manner in which I said, we can't do that right now. And she looked at me and I go, we cannot do that right now. So it's just little things like that. And she said, oh, okay, we can't do that right now. So it's improper for us to go talk to her right now. So, okay. So it's just little things like that when it comes to, diversity and what we're talking about. So we're looking forward to more of your characters. But more importantly, as we talked about this, I'm more into, I want you to share before we leave more about your ministry as well. I want you to tell us more about your ministry and how we can contact you about that as well.
Yeah. So there are two ministries that I'm involved in, two nonprofits. One is called Light for the Future, and the website is www.lightforthefuture.org. And I teach for them, and I sponsor a few students. I'm actually an art teacher for them, and I teach virtually. I've been able to work with them, I think it's about 3 times in person, and that school is in Guatemala. And that school is meant to educate and better the lives of very marginalized people, as well as to share the gospel. And I also work with an organization called Submersion 14, and the website is www.submersion14.com. And I'm on their board. And that particular organization goes into the local and global community to serve mostly children. And they want to provide for them hygiene bags and educational bags, and to better their lives. And most importantly, to spread the gospel. And then the other way that you can touch base with me is through my website, which is www.drkatherinehayes.com, or on Instagram at author Dr. Katherine. And the last project I'm involved in, which I am loving, is a podcast available on Apple, Spotify, and a bunch of other platforms. But that podcast is called Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem, Laced with Morality.
Hello there, whether it's good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, I'd like to welcome you to our podcast, Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem, Laced with Morality, with the lovely Dr. Katherine.
Well, hello there. Welcome of a Murder, Mystery, and Mayhem laced with morality. That's it. Yes, morality. So it's darkness with lots of light. Anyway, I would like to invite all of our authors who write in this genre, whether it's a thriller, whether it's CIA, FBI, police procedural, legal thrillers, whether it's a cozy mystery or something a little darker. I invite you to not only subscribe to this podcast, but please contact me so that we can set up your interview. I would love to talk about what you write about. And it's a place where it's not just for suspense writers, but all writers are invited to contribute as with an author interview. And I ask you a bunch of scripted questions regarding your journey. And then I also interview experts in the field. So those are people who are networking experts, people who are journalists, people who are particular to my genre, like detectives, forensic scientists, and people in the intelligence field. We interview them instead of writers having to go a million different places to get information.
Okay. Well, I I would love to just sit in on that podcast, so you're gonna have to send me an invite. I just want to sit and listen.
Yes. No, you need an interview for our expert series.
Nah, I just want to sit and listen. Yeah, I'm intrigued. I'm sitting here looking at this smile, and I'm sitting there going, that's funny to me. You have no idea. It'd be like, I'm looking at that smile, and I'm looking at this smile, and it'd be like, oh,
Oh, that's a long time ago.
yeah, I know, right? Right?
Uh,
Yeah, that's from a long time ago. Yeah,
uh.
yeah. So, but
But
I'm
there's
like,
one last point that you brought up, and you talked about sensitivity when it comes to biopic people. And I'm really grateful that I have started working with an editing service. I serve as their as sensitivity reader for them, and it's called Reading Between the Lines. So anyone who is writing from the perspective of someone outside of their race and culture, it is a great place to go to get the services that you need, because we do more harm or disservice to our writing or a group of people by writing stereotypically than any good, even if we have a good story. So it's better to have your writing vested by a professional to make sure you're not putting something harmful out there.
right, right. And then that's you know what? I'm glad that you said that, because I would like to invite you back, and I would like to have a topic on what you just said and how important that you understand that. I think that's a show that should be by itself, and that we can talk about that, and perhaps we probably can think about somebody that you lean on to help people understand what that means and why that's so important,
Mm-hmm.
because that's very, very, very important. And that's one of the reasons why NABJ has tried to do what they do, National Association of Black Journalists, because we need to understand what you just said. A lot of people don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's a responsibility, especially now that social media is so much part of our lives. It's like, if you take away social media right now, I think people start jumping off of buildings. Serious. I'm serious. It's like, wow, okay. Now I can tell you so many stories that just because we're in that age bracket. I was telling somebody the other day, we're in that age bracket, you and I, that we can relate to the black and white TV in the sense of understanding. We're close enough and young enough to be familiar with the beginning of movies and radio and television, that we can talk about some of these old shows where the millennials have no idea. One of my one of the guys that hired me when I worked in radio, and he said this to me about 3 or 4 years ago. He said, "Charles, do you know that there are some kids who have never listened to a radio station?" And for me, that's just like, what? Or there was a situation going on, and the guy was talking to his son, and there was an emergency going on at the house where the young gentleman had come in, and the father told him to go over to the house phone and see if there was a dial tone. And he said, "Dad, what's a dial tone?" And for somebody like you and I, we what's what you mean, But then when you think about it, for me to think that these kids have never heard a radio station, or you don't know what a dial tone is, you'd be like, you have to step back for a minute and go like, okay, let me process this for a minute, because that's real, So,
Yeah.
so we can relate to that, but at the same time, we're in this stage now where people don't know what a dial tone is. I
Yeah.
don't know.
The
But
funny thing about me, though, I grew up without a TV. So
right.
I, yeah.
Yeah, and then
So
I
it's
can
hard for me
understand
to
that.
talk about television shows. But I do know about the phone with the long cord.
That's funny.
Ah,
Yeah, that's that's funny.
a whole
So
different era.
yeah, summing up for us as we come to the end of me hanging out with Dr. Hayes, and I get to see the beautiful smile, once again. Summing up for us about the mystery writer and where we can find you and what to look forward to.
Yeah. So you can look forward to the book A Fifth of the Story. Hopefully that will be out within 18 to 24 months. And right now you can join me on my podcast series. If you are an expert or a writer, I would love to hear from you. And you can find me on my website, and it's www.drkatherinehayes.com, and it's Catherine with a K, and on Instagram at author Dr. Catherine. Send me a message and let me know if you would be interested in being a guest and interacting with us.
I want to be a guest. I want to be a guest. I
Yes,
want
you're
to be a guest.
invited.
Yeah, well, thank you for taking the time to come on the Journey 2020. I really appreciate that. See, the thing of it is that I shouldn't really be in awe of anything that you do because you have, since the day I met you, you have consistently been you. You never changed in your spirit and and who you are. So with all that you're doing, I should be like, well, yeah, 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 you just being you. And you have a magnificent story that, you kind of shared, you kind of briefly talked about it, but and that is coming back from, from the birth of your daughter and what happened, which you really didn't go into detail about. I mean, you talked about it last time on the show, but that right there and how you came back from that and that journey, that's a miracle. And just to see you, and one would never know, one would never know that the challenge that you had and how you worked back to who you are and to the life that you're living, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So what we may do in addition to the other show that I was talking about doing, maybe we can have you come back to, and for those, because I have someone in my circle right now, which is having that challenge, and she was a magnificent singer, and people in her circle was just, oh my gosh, she's not gonna ever sing again, and so I don't know the probability of what need to take place or if that can happen. But it would be great to have you come back on to talk about your journey and to know that there's hope that you can come back to a normal life.
Yes, I would love that. It's always a pleasure to hang out with you. You're always throwing curveballs, and it's a ton of fun.
Okay, well, hold on a second. Before you leave, let me go ahead and close out the show for a minute, and we will get back with you. Wow, so much murder, mystery, and mayhem. Sound like a typical day with the family, right? Anyway, for those out there, writers and so on and so forth, gave you a lot of information. And you can easily find her, on the internet, through her Instagram, Facebook, her website, and everything. And so I'm intrigued. In addition to her ministry and so on and so forth, she a great deal of talent. So I doubt very seriously if she lives a boring life in addition to being married with children. And so, it's funny, when you meet someone able to find their passion, well, live through their passion and their gifts that God has given them. It's a wonderful thing. I'm Charles Morris. This is the Journey 2020, and I'm not sure if this has been any mayhem, a mystery, a murder, anything like that, but I try to come to you every Monday at 7 p.m. to bring you as much information as I can. We've been around since 2013. A lot of good information for the show today, and again, through all that she talked about, for those who are into writing and want to get more into the writing and want outlets and some help, I think that was one of the things that she really talked about as well. So you got all the information. Make sure you contact her, and maybe we'll be able to talk about you here on the Journey 2020 as well. Again, many prayers go out for those that are dealing with the storm and the tornadoes with the different states, and looking at the devastation that was left behind. Remember to be wise and continuously to wear your mask and proper distancing. As you know, the statistics are going up. So I would always say, just be smart in what you do. I still wear my mask very much. As a matter of fact, I find myself wearing my mask when I don't have to, because I'm so used to wearing it now. I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm by myself and no one's around and I have the mask on, whether or not I'm in the car, and sometimes I'm just so accustomed to having it. But I would say just use common sense. And remember, I was saying earlier that on the Pastors Roundtable, be looking for that. We've been doing that going on close to 2 years now. Our topic for the month of December: have we truly taken Christ out of Christmas? That's a good show. For questions, comments, or concerns, hit me up with an email, with that being said. As I always say, the word comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. I'm Charles Morris. Enjoy the rest of your week, whether or not, and I hope there's no murder. There's always mystery, and there's mayhem going on somewhere. You know what I'm saying? That's what that is. I don't know this. That's what I find out. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your week. You be good.